For those of us who've come through onto the other side of a cancer diagnosis, one thing is for sure: we are a lot more resilient, we are mentally stronger, and we kind of gain a wisdom through the experiences that we've been that really propel you onto a different level than where you were before you were diagnosed. But there is one area where we, all of us, remain increasingly vulnerable. It's a raw spot, the Achilles heel in our healing journey, and that is the fear of recurrence. No matter what we do, it remains there, almost like a monster hidden in a closet that is constantly watching you. And it really is our responsibility to try and tame that monster and turn it into something else than a monster that is constantly watching you. I'm Kirstin Nussgruber from Kirstin'sCancerCare.com, and I help people with cancer get out of overwhelm by teaching them how to reclaim their lives. I have been through a recurrence phase myself, and it's coming from the heart, what I need to share with you right now. It's basically, there is nothing worse at that point in time than being told that either your cancer has returned, meaning it is the same cancer with the same biomarkers, maybe in the same organ, maybe it has metastasized, or it is the development of a new cancer. In other words, having different biomarkers. So it's its own cancer diagnosis, as it were. I had to experience that 3 years after my initial diagnosis, and I won't lie. You really are thrown into the deep end at that point in time, and really strong emotions of feeling betrayed by your body and by all the efforts that you have done come up. A sense of hopelessness comes up too. We kind of wonder, well, is this all working? What else do I need to do? Those emotions are real, and we shouldn't really belittle them, and we should certainly not suppress them. But what do we do after that? What do we do in general when we've had a cancer diagnosis, being your first or your second? How do we deal with the fear of recurrence? And that is where, to me, who've always embraced an approach where I take conventional and I take complementary, and I combine what is best for me and me as an individual. And that is really this, at these crossroads, right? Very often also when you've finished certain rounds of treatments, if we were just looking at the conventional side, is where you're left pretty much on your own. You get told, come back in a couple of months and we'll do some backup checks, but you don't really get a blueprint of what can I do in the meantime, other than just try and get back to normal, try and live a life where I hope cancer won't return, and then work up and fear and anxiety when it comes to the scans that need to be done, the follow-up scans, and figure out, I hope there isn't anything showing up. Well, you are here for a reason, listening to me, I hope, and you're in the right place, because we, all of us, we can do so much more other than just sit back and relax and wait for the diagnostic scans to happen. And they're important because we need to know what's going on in our bodies, especially when we've been diagnosed with cancer. So let's not ignore those. We need to go through that. But we can do so much else in the meantime. Our body is a unique system, and even though it has had cancer, there are still many functioning parts of that that we can support. So how do we approach that? We understand that everything is connected. So we know that we need to eat right. We need to sleep well. We need to exercise. We need to think well. We need to feel well and connect well with ourselves and with those around us. Those are the main areas we need to focus on. So that really feeds into the whole notion that if we have genetic mutations that predispose us to cancer or increase the risk of cancer, let's understand that only about 5% of cancers are really related to genes, to a genetic background. The rest are lifestyle induced, and we can do so much more when we focus on all these areas. And all these areas that I've just mentioned earlier, they need the same level of detail and level of attention. we then monitor our bodies in a different way than just using diagnostic scans and CT scans and PET scans and maybe mammograms or thermography. All of those diagnostic tools, they play a role, but we can't rely on them only. What we need to look at is other factors that we know influences cancer or that create an environment in which cancer growth has a higher chance to happen, especially when we've been diagnosed before and we've gone through extensive treatments. So what are those areas? Number one, inflammation. We have to understand that there could be inflammatory processes going on in the body that we can monitor though. First of all, we can monitor them. And this is where a combination of using conventional labs come into play as well as certain functional labs. In other words, testing. Get data other than the data that we get from the scans, which only really looks for cancer growth. We need to focus on other data as well to see what else is going on in our body. Where is there a weakness? Where is there an imbalance that I can correct? So when it comes to inflammation, what fuels inflammation? We have to focus on our gut health. What is going on in the gut? Because we could have leaky gut or intestinal permeability. That can be as a result from many things. For example, our cancer treatments could have exacerbated that. Certain food issues with food, wheat sensitivities or wheat allergies can contribute to that, but stress as well. So our gut lining is really a key player. Why don't we look at that and figure out, are you healthy? Are you strong? Are all your cells in alignment? Is nothing leaking through, which can cause inflammation? So gut health is really such an important part, not just because of intestinal permeability or leaky gut, as it is also known, but what other imbalances are going on? What's our microbiome like? Do we have a healthy population of healthy bacteria? Do we have pathogenic bacteria that we need to know of? We don't necessarily know it yet, but we need to look at that. Do we have a fungal infection, candida maybe? Do we have parasites? Those are clues and things we can test for. It's an imbalance we can address with nutrition and lifestyle. It's something that we can do. It empowers us not just to sit back and wait for the next scan, but to be proactive. Then we also look at the general immune system, of course. What is going on with it? We need to always understand, where do we lie? What is our immune system capable of doing? Is it strong enough? How do we test for that? Well, nutritional deficiencies are vitally important to understand, and I don't mean just checking vitamin D levels and maybe magnesium and calcium, which seems to be standard. Maybe they throw vitamin B12 into the mix too. No, I'm taking this a lot further. We need to understand that there's a whole concert, a whole symphony of nutrients, and I'm talking about vitamins, I'm talking about minerals, I'm talking about amino acids, which are part of proteins. I'm also talking about antioxidants, phytonutrients too. Where are we on the spectrum? Do we have certain deficiencies? Are we borderline in those? Then we can target that with nutrition, with certain supplementation as well, to get that balance back up again, because all those nutrients I mentioned, a symphony, a concert, they work like that. They need to be there. They need to support the immune system so it can do its job. It can figure out, do we have aberrant cancers cells? Do we have normal cells that are going AWOL? Can we intervene? Because our immune system generally can do that. So we want to support that at every stage. Right? We need to look at our hormonal load as well. What are hormones doing? Especially those of us who've had hormone receptor positive cancers. In other words, hormones can fuel cancer growth. What is going on with our hormonal imbalances, right? Do we have any? How are our hormones broken down in the body? We need to know that too. Not just are we high and low in them, but what's happening in them, because there's a whole complicated biochemical pathways that are happening. What are these pathways? Again, this is where functional tests can give us some more clues as to what is going on in my body, and that can be very different to what is going on in your body. But it's information we can glean. So I'm still in the monitoring phase, right? This is what we can do. We monitor our health every year, annually, depending on sometimes even every 6 months. We need to get that information. Nutritional deficiencies too, but also do we have certain nutrients that we have a high level of, which could also be conducive to cancer growth. High iron levels or copper levels are no good. They can fuel cancer growth. They can contribute to a process called angiogenesis, is where cancer cells can start attracting blood vessels to themselves so that they get nourished and can grow and develop. So we need to keep an eye on those levels as well, again, from a functional point of view. Talking about inflammation, immune system, hormones, and next on my list is the toxic load, the toxic burden that we carry, and that can be very different for each of us, even those living in the same household, having grown up in the same households. We still have different toxic burdens because it's directly related to also, first of all, exposure, but also how well our bodies can actually detoxify. And that's a topic in itself that we can monitor with certain testing. For toxic loads, we look at factors that can influence our immune system, our health, our ability to fight cancer. So what do we look at here? We look at heavy metal contamination. Do we have an excess of heavy metals in our system? Do we have non-heavy metals? We can look for those too. Other influences from pesticides, from food sources, from our furniture, from our home environment. Is this affecting us? Have we been exposed? And if so, what do we do about it? Then secondly, we look at mold exposure. Mycotoxins is what we look at. There's a whole plethora of different mycotoxins, all different mold parts. And they play a key role in thyroid health, in adrenal health, in, for example, our ability to be able to deal with stress. It's going to be my next point. But also how our immune system can function in certain parts of that immune system. Certain immune cells, the natural killer cells, the T lymphocytes. We have different parts of our white blood cells that play different roles when it comes to protecting us. And mycotoxins can affect those. They can also affect our nutrients. They can deplete our nutrients, something we don't necessarily know of. They can deplete us of all those nutrients that our liver needs to effectively detoxify. So if we've had exposure to mold, if we have mycotoxins, that's one area we need to look at as well in the overall topic of toxic load. Where are we on that spectrum? And then, of course, what can we do about that? And then lastly, stress response, right? So this again, is an area that is up to us. Now, note that I didn't say stop stress or remove stress, because that is very difficult to do in today's day and age, and it's simply not realistic. Some stresses we may be able to move away from or eliminate from our lives, but certainly others we are stuck with. But it's our response to the stress that we can influence. But first of all, we also need to realize and monitor us, again, from a lab point of view. How is our stress response from a biochemical point of view? What's going on there? Are there certain imbalances here? And if so, then let's start addressing those, because that is our biggest clue to whether we can effectively deal with stress or not. And the fear of recurrence is one of the biggest stresses out there. And if you, for example, are an incredibly anxious person, if you are so-called worrywart, if you constantly find every little thing that you come across as negative or as potentially harming you, then you have a problem. And there's a certain biochemical imbalance in you. It means you can't really deal with stress very well. And we need to look at that. And that's something that you can do. So the game plan really is we look at, we monitor ourselves. We take the monitoring away from just using diagnostic scans to see if cancer has recurred, and we broaden the horizon so much more. We look at other imbalances that exist in our body that we can influence with certain very targeted labs. We're using conventional labs, but we're also going functional labs, and there are a couple of functional labs that I utilize when I work with my clients, and that give us really awesome information where we can take the power into our own hands and decide, all right, those are my particular weak areas. This is what I need to do. This is how I need to address those, and then we take it from there. To me, once we've been diagnosed and we get into this stage of how do we prevent it from happening again? Rather than look at it as I am so afraid of this, turn it around, because that's really our main job as cancer survivors, thrivers, patients, warriors, fighters, however we want to define ourselves. We need to transform the relationship we have with our cancer, and that really is the only way forward. Part of our healing process. It's not going to go away. We're always going to have cancer part of us. So why not, instead of viewing it as a monster that is always there, that is really screwing up or messing up our lives, we view it as this is a huge opportunity to refocus and reprioritize our life. And we can do that with very specific goal setting. And that is something that all of us need to do, because it helps us focus on what are the areas in my life that I need to focus on, and what are the areas that I should not be focusing on, that I may be spending too much time and emotional power with it, that is affecting my healing. Because the recovery and healing process from cancer, that takes time. So just because a cancer treatment has stopped doesn't mean that in 2-3 months you really bounce back on all levels, physically, emotionally, mentally. No, it doesn't take that. It doesn't work that way, right? It takes a lot more to put into it, and we carry that weight. We have to add to what we do here. So goal setting, I find that incredibly helpful, because it really focuses you and says, what exactly do you need to do right now? It puts the ball back in your court, because I, as your coach, for example, I can't prioritize this for you. Only you know what you can prioritize in your own life. But we can think and we can talk about issues like, what do you value most, right? I've read a book by Dr. Julie Silver, and she wrote a book, now there's a new one out, Before and After Cancer Treatment. She herself is a cancer survivor, and she is a renowned medical professional who really has dedicated a lot of her time to creating rehabilitation programs for cancer patients. And the questions that she has, that she asks, are very basic questions. But do we really ask those? Generally, no, because we get so busy falling back into the roles that we had prior to the cancer diagnosis, prior to the treatments and what the treatments did to us. We turn back into the roles of mother, of partner, of lover, of employee or employer, you name it. And we don't spend time to really plan our healing and recovery journey. We need to do that, because that is one key also to put us into a phase or a state where we feel in alignment, that we are doing enough. And we also feel, I can face you, the fear of recurrence, because we need to face it. It is there. It's not going to go away. We need to know how we can face that, how we can kind of strengthen ourselves to be able to face it head on and really surrender to what it means for each and every one of us. So the questions that you can ask yourself are, what do you value most in your life? What do you want to do more of? What do you want to do least of? Again, I told you, these are very basic questions, but they're very important. And we really need to sit down, think about that, and preferably write it down, because the process of actually putting pen to paper and writing down does, stimulate and reinforce and set the intention of what we want to achieve. Questions like, what do you dread the most? And what you certainly want to eliminate from your life? And in other words, what do you find difficult in your life? What do you find boring? What's coming up? What interpersonal relationships are coming up when you're doing this process of goal setting that you need to pay attention to? Because all these thoughts that suddenly come into your head are important to pay attention to, because they need your attention and they need you to do something about it. And that's really it for this Facebook Live, to give you an overview of you can do so much more. You can monitor yourself on so many other levels. We need to look at your inflammation markers. We need to look at your immune system. We need to look at your toxic load, your stress response, and your hormone balance. Those are 5 key areas that we can use both conventional and functional testing to give us data to then come up with a game plan for you, and a very dedicated nutrition and lifestyle protocol that puts you back in charge. I'm Kirstin Nussgruber from Kirstin'sCancerCare.com. That's my website. I have written a book called Confessions of a Cancer Conqueror, my 5-step process to transform your relationship with cancer, because that's really what we need to do. You can find me on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and YouTube. I have a couple of videos like this to put you really back into the driving seat. You're the captain of the ship. There's so much we can and we must do. As a coach, I'm here to guide you and to empower you to make really strong decisions for yourself so that you regain control that you feel has been taken away from you with a cancer diagnosis. So leave comments here too. I regularly check in again in these posts to see what people have to say. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any contribution, maybe let me know what you're doing to keep the fear of recurrence at bay. And if you're interested in working with me further, I do offer a free assessment call. It's 15 minutes long. You can find the link to schedule that on my website, Kirstin'sCancerCare.com. And maybe we'll just touch base. Take care for now.